This is Christian with ABCV Poker. Today we're going to discuss where the money comes from and why. Let me show you some data. The following slide are my tournament stats. This is a 233,000 hand sample. At 33 hands an hour, this is over 7,000 hours in a casino. Since these are tournament stats, we will be looking at the all-in adjusted win rate. So the money comes from the button and it tapers off as we move further away. We're going to be comparing button versus under the gun, their win rate and their opening range. So on the button, I open 45% of hands. I'm making 30.8 big blinds per 100. From under the gun, I open 18% of hands. I'm making 8.1 big blinds per 100. To try to quantify this win rate in terms of a cash game, my button win rate is roughly $50 an hour at a 5-5 game, and this under the gun would be $13.50 per hour. Let's compare my opening ranges in terms of equity strength, so 45% versus 18%. This isn't a perfect example because these are both opening ranges and they don't compete against each other. The point is, one range is stronger than the other, and that's it. Here's my button opening range at 45%. Here's my under the gun opening range at 18%. It's a lot stronger than the button range, 57% versus 42%. So range strength and equity doesn't mean more profit. We can't just rank hands from strongest to weakest, or ranges from strongest to weakest based on equity. We don't simply win more money by having a stronger range. Otherwise, my under the gun win rate would be higher than the button. So how can a range that's wider and weaker generate nearly 4 times the profit? Hopefully that's obvious. It's position. So how does position convert into higher profits if we're generally weaker equity-wise? Well, we get to over-realize our equity, and that has a name. It's called equity realization. Before I tie this all together, if you're finding some value here, consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and leaving a comment on what you'd like me to cover next. So, equity realization. Being in position allows us to realize more than our fair share of equity. What you're seeing here is an in-position player. Let's choose the hijack versus a big blind calling range in a tournament setting. The pot is 5.7 big blinds. Notice how there's no flop out here because we're looking across all flops. So this is just the averages. Across all flops, the hijack has 60% equity, big blind has 40% equity. The EV that we win from this pot, on average, is going to be 4.05 big blinds from the hijack, and the big blind wins 1.66 big blinds. Then we've got equity realization, 117%, 73%. So equity realization here is a more useful metric than just the raw equity itself. You can use this to try to recognize an advantage. If you were to take the pot size of 5.7 and you punch in your equity strength, 65.7, you're going to see that just on our raw equity strength alone, we would be entitled to about 3.45 big blinds, but that doesn't take into account the betting and position and the range advantage and nut advantage. So raw equity, the 60 versus 40, this assumes that we just open our range, the big blind calls their range, and we just run out the flop without any betting. We would win on average 60% of the time. It's not that helpful. What we need to know is this equity realization and how to quantify it. So if we take our equity strength, 60.57, and you multiply it by 117%, our equity realization, times 117%, we're closer to 71% equity across every flop that you can imagine, all boards that you can encounter. We're closer to 71%. So I'm showing you that being in position is going to boost our equity by at least 10% in this example, even against the solver. Now imagine how much more edge you have against the average player. So what we would do now is we would take the pot size, 5.7, and you'd multiply it by our new equity, which is 71%. And now you're seeing our EV show up, 4.05. So we're gaining half a big blind on a perfect solver opponent. Imagine the edge you have on humans. It's much bigger than that. And one more example of equity realization. So here we gave ourselves the uncapped range versus a range that is capped, the big blind. Let's look at a range where we don't have the aces, we don't have the kings, we don't have the ace king because we would have 3-bet pre-flop. So here on this example, the hijack has opened and the button has called. So the button has removed the strongest hands from the range because we decided to call versus 3-bet. The hijack's equity realization is still under 100%, and we still get to over-realize our equity, even when we don't have aces and we don't have kings and we don't have queens. We're missing the strongest parts of our range, and we get to over-realize our equity simply by being in position. Some takeaways. Position is power. You're going to have more information. You'll make better decisions, fewer mistakes. You realize more than your fair share of equity. We can control the size of the pot, apply pressure, all while risking less chips. Play in position. You'll win more pots. I'll see you on the next one.